The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks, my friend. Much appreciated. And thanks to at home for joining us this hour. Lots of moving parts here tonight. We are, of course, in day 34 of the government shutdown, with the federal employees now warning about an air safety environment that is deteriorating by the day. It's an alarming assessment. With food stamps slated to stop altogether for millions of families across the country, with the FBI now warning darkly about active, serious criminal and counterintelligence investigations being brought to a halt, with hundreds of thousands of federal employees of all kinds being required to show up for work at the risk of being fired if they don't, even while they are not being paid, for a second month now. The president's top economic advisor has now said that it's nice that these federal workers are volunteering to come to work without pay. They are not volunteering. The Trump administration is requiring them to come to work without pay, or they will lose their jobs. The president's commerce secretary today said he is absolutely confounded as to why federal employees might be starting to go to food pantries and soup kitchens to feed themselves and their families now that they're going into a second month with $0 paychecks. Billionaire Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said today, when he was asked if he understood that federal workers were doing that, he was asked about that today, and he replied, quote, "I don't really quite understand why. Why are they doing that?" Then the president himself commented that, as far as he understands, local people, that was his phrase, local people, and specifically local grocery stores, are undoubtedly happy to help people out in circumstances like this. If people are working for free now and they can't pay for groceries, don't grocery stores just give you stuff if you say you really need it, even if you can't pay? Isn't that how it works for you local people? So it has been a kinetic day in Washington, with renewed but still failed efforts to end the shutdown, and the president and his administration sort of falling off a cliff today in terms of their demonstrated ability to understand, let alone empathize with, the kind of pain they are causing here. We're going to have much more on that fight, both about what happened today and about what is going to happen next. We'll have that coming up over the course of this hour tonight. But I have to tell you, I have bumped a little of that coverage down a few minutes in the hour tonight, because just within the past hour, NBC News has broken what appears to be a very big story. This actually just broke in the middle of Chris Hayes' last hour. NBC News has just posted it. But this is a super serious story. And I want to make sure that you have seen this tonight. Again, this is broken within the last hour. It's about something apparently quite unprecedented going on in the Trump White House when it comes to security clearances. Security clearances are how our nation makes sure that people who have access to secretive, sensitive, potentially dangerous information can be trusted with that information so that it doesn't end up in foreign hands or in the hands of people who might use it to hurt us. And the security clearance process has been a recurring worry in the Trump White House. There was that alarming NBC News report last year that a year into the Trump administration, dozens of senior administration officials who had applied for permanent security clearances still had not been able to get them. Almost exactly a year ago, The New Yorker reported that senior White House advisor Jared Kushner had been unable to obtain a security clearance for at least his first year working in the White House, when the president, nevertheless, among other things, was allowing that senior advisor to read the highly classified President's Daily Brief every day while he couldn't get a security clearance. Just this week, we have been on this story. The committees in the new Democratic-led Congress are getting their membership lists squared away. They're getting their new chairmen and chairwomen elected. And as those committees get geared up, we learned from the Oversight Committee chairman, Congressman Elijah Cummings, that Democrats right now, right away, right out of the gate, are pursuing from the Trump White House critical information about how the security clearance process was handled for, among other people, Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, who, of course, has since pled guilty to lying about his conversations with the Russian government. Flynn is now awaiting sentencing. From Elijah Cummings' letter to the White House this week, we know that Cummings and his committee, they want information on why the Trump White House didn't yank Mike Flynn's clearance after they were warned repeatedly and explicitly by the Justice Department that Flynn was compromised by the Russian government and he was lying about his dealings with them. After they got that warning, they took no action in terms of restricting Flynn's access to secret, top secret, or even compartmentalized information, despite the fact that the Justice Department was telling them that the Russian government had one over on him. And so anything that he had access to presumably was liable to ending up at the Kremlin. Why didn't you yank his clearance? Elijah Cummings this week inquired with the Trump White House about the security clearance concerns over Mike Flynn, also Mike Flynn's son, who worked on the transition, also Flynn's deputy, K.T. McFarland, who also reportedly lied to the FBI about communications with the Russian government, also another deputy of Flynn's who was reportedly rejected for a top security clearance while working as a senior figure under Flynn on Trump's National Security Council. What was that about? You installed this person at the top levels of the National Security Council, and that person could not qualify for a security clearance? Did you put the cart before the horse there? Cummings also inquired about Jared Kushner's security clearance and that of the current National Security Advisor, John Bolton, particularly given his past interactions with Maria Butina, who has now pled guilty to acting as a secret agent for the Russian government, trying to infiltrate the conservative movement and the Republican Party. Did y'all check out Bolton with regard to Maria Butina before you made him National Security Advisor? Did that go through the clearance process? Did he disclose that? Did you know about the video he did for her group, the one with the Russian subtitles? So we know that the security clearance issue in this White House is a serious one and a live one. But what NBC News has just broken tonight is about how the White House has apparently been subverting the whole security clearance system so that they can give clearances to people who would otherwise be rejected. And it's not just one here or there. Apparently, according to this NBC News report tonight, it is dozens of people, including at the very highest levels of the White House, including Jared Kushner. Here's the lead. Quote, Jared Kushner's application for a top secret clearance was rejected by 2 career White House security specialists after an FBI background check raised concerns about potential foreign influence on him. But their supervisor overruled the recommendation and approved Kushner's clearance. Again, this is NBC News reporting just from this past hour, citing 2 sources familiar with the matter. Quote, Kushner's was one of at least 30 cases in which that supervisor overruled career security experts and approved a top secret clearance for incoming Trump officials, despite unfavorable information. The 2 sources said the number of rejections that were overruled was unprecedented. It had happened only once in the 3 years preceding the arrival of that supervisor. And then he did it at least 30 times? Who is this supervisor who keeps overruling all the rejections and handing out security clearances anyway? According to NBC News tonight, he is Carl Klein, K-L-I-N-E. He was reportedly installed as director of the Personnel Security Office in the Executive Office of the President in May 2017. So that's like 4 months-ish into the new administration. They put someone new in the Office of Personnel Security in the White House. NBC says Carl Klein was approached multiple times for comment in conjunction with this story, and he didn't respond. But what NBC News is reporting tonight is that once 4 months-ish into this administration, they put this new guy into the Office of Personnel Security in the White House. Remember, a lot of the reporting about the initial security clearance problems was that people were just working at the White House without being able to get a clearance. Well, 4 months in, they put somebody in who apparently tried to solve that problem for them. I mean, once they had that guy in there, he started overruling it when career security clearance folks said no, this should be a rejection. I mean, this reporting is that 30 times at least, this one supervisor who Trump put in there, 30 times at least, this guy handed out a clearance to an incoming Trump White House person who was otherwise flagged as too risky to get a clearance approved. 30 of them, at minimum. Christ. For very basic context here, as far as I understand it, there are basically 4 levels of security clearance. I mean, it's not quite this simple. I know there's more nuance than this, but as far as I understand it, there's confidential, which is the lowest level, then there's secret, which is the next level up, then there's top secret, and above that is one that's actually quite different. It's called sensitive compartmented information. And that one requires a whole different level of scrutiny. In terms of Jared Kushner's clearance being rejected by career officials and then okayed anyway by this guy installed by Trump, here's how this new reporting explains how that went. This is a little nuts. Quote, the White House office only determines eligibility for secret and top secret clearances. Above that level, the CIA is the agency that decides whether to grant SCI, whether to grant, sensitive compartmented information clearances to senior officials after the CIA conducts a further background check. Quote, initially, Kushner's application followed the normal path for security clearance. The initial request was made by the White House, and then it went to the FBI for a background investigation. And that is where the problems reportedly arose. Quote, Kushner's FBI background check identified questions about his family's business, his foreign contacts, his foreign travel, and meetings he had had during the campaign, the sources said, declining to be more specific. I will just note here that this sort of comports with other reporting that we've got, right? We know that 2 days into the Trump administration, Jared Kushner initially applied for a security clearance and listed no foreign contacts. Yeah, not even like the Trump Tower meeting, and not even like the meeting with the sanctioned Russian bank CEO, and nothing. He listed nothing. We know that he had to revise his security clearance application more than 40 times over the course of him starting his employment at the White House. We know that the New Yorker and the Wall Street Journal last year both reported that the FBI had come to the Trump White House specifically to warn them that Jared was the target of foreign influence operations. The Washington Post also reported last year in February that at least 4 different countries had been heard by U.S. intelligence agencies, strategizing and kibitzing amongst themselves over ways they knew they could manipulate and compromise Jared Kushner to get him to do their bidding. So the FBI background check on Kushner, turning up questions about him in terms of foreign influence, it's not a stretch, right? It is not that much of a surprise given all the other open source reporting we have seen on that front. But what is a surprise and what is brand new here is what NBC News says happened next. Quote, following the FBI investigation, the case went back to the White House Office of Personnel Security, where a career adjudicator reviewed the FBI information, including questions about foreign influence and foreign business entanglements. On the basis of potential foreign influence, the adjudicator deemed Kushner's application unfavorable and then handed it to a supervisor. The supervisor agreed with the unfavorable determination and then gave it to Carl Klein, the newly installed head of the office, who overruled the unfavorable determination and approved Kushner for top secret security clearance. Now, at this point, this Trump-installed official being put in to run that office, and at this point, having had that official grant Jared Kushner top secret clearance, this White House official appointed by Trump did that, despite the red flags turned up by the FBI, by the career people who review FBI information at the White House. I mean, the career people who review this information at the White House at 2 different levels looked at what the FBI turned up on Jared Kushner, and they were like, no way, don't do this. But nevertheless, this Trump-installed official says, I don't care, I'm overruling you, give him his top secret clearance anyway. And then what did they do next? The White House decided, you know what, actually, all we can do is give him a top secret clearance, but let's try to get him the even higher level of clearance, too. Let's go to the CIA and see if we can get him the really good one. Quote, as a very senior official, Kushner was seeking an even higher designation that would grant him access to what is known as sensitive compartmented information, or SCI. That material makes up the government's most sensitive secrets. And again, getting an SCI clearance is something that the White House can do on its own. It has to be approved by the CIA, and the CIA does its own background check for that. So check this out. Quote, after Klein overruled the White House security specialists and recommended Kushner for a top secret clearance, Kushner's file then went to the CIA for a ruling on the SCI clearance. After reviewing the file, CIA officers who make clearance decisions balked, 2 of the people familiar with the matter said. One called over to the White House Security Division, wondering how Kushner even got a top secret clearance, the sources said. Quote, the sources say the CIA has not granted Kushner clearance to review SCI material. So this Trump appointee is installed 4 months in, four-ish months into the Trump administration. And that person overrules the career people who say, no, do not do this for Kushner's top secret clearance. They give him a top secret clearance. Then they want to get him the next one up. The CIA handles that one. The CIA would not push over on this one, on the highest level of clearance for Kushner. And so the CIA didn't grant him that. But of course, the president himself could overrule that if he wanted to. Has he? He seems to be treating this whole matter with real seriousness, right? Joining us now is Brad Moss. He's a national security attorney. He specializes in litigation related to national security, federal employment, and security clearance law. Lucky for us, he has precisely the expertise that we need right now. Mr. Moss, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good evening, Rachel.
Part of the reason I wanted to speak with you tonight is that I know that you spoke with Ken Delaney, our colleague at NBC News, as he was researching this story. I wonder if you could just give us a sense of how abnormal this is. There's a line in this reporting from NBC News tonight in Ken's story that says this sort of thing that happened at the White House, this overruling of the career officials on the basis of the FBI background information, that had happened once in 3 years before this particular supervisor got there. NBC says he did it more than at least 30 times. Is that as much a break from standard practice as it sounds?
I'll say this, in 12 years of representing people across the intelligence community, defense contractors, government personnel, military personnel, I've never seen this. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm certain there are certain exceptions of the rule, and there's been times that it's happened over, various decades that we've had clearances. But the fact that it was done here, this is what we always feared. This is what we were worried was going to happen when the president broke with the custom of not bringing his kids in, not bringing family. This is what we feared was going to happen. They brought Jared Kushner in. They brought Ivanka Trump in. There were obvious, clearly identifiable foreign influence concerns, foreign personal financial ties, extensive foreign contacts, extensive foreign travel, questionable judgment about how Jared handled stuff in the transition in terms of wanting to use the Russian government's secure line to conceal it from the U.S. government. All of those things, if it had been one of my clients, they would have been walked out the door, laughed out of the room. It would never have even been a consideration that they get cleared. That the two adjudicators said no makes complete sense to me. That's exactly what would have happened to my clients. It's exactly what we always expected would have happened here. That this individual, that Mr. Klein, and he had the authority to do this, let's be clear, but it's a questionable decision as to why, that he overruled them and granted the top secret clearance raises significant questions of whether or not there was improper political influence and what the basis for the determination is, especially, as you indicated and as Ken Delanian's reporting showed, that CIA balked and said, are you kidding us? We're not giving him SCI access.
I feel like there's sort of two lenses to look through for this story. And one of them is definitely a, this is why there's rules against nepotism story, right? One of this is a very dramatic story about the president's son-in-law being elevated to a position and then obviously given what appears to be very special and potentially dangerous treatment in that position. But there's also this reporting that this supervisor has done this at least 30 times. And that, to me, even if Jared Kushner didn't exist in this story, the idea that there are 30 people working in the White House who have been red flagged as unsuitable to receive a security clearance, who have nevertheless been given these clearances, which means with those clearances they have access to the kind of information you can't see if you don't have one. I mean, to me, that just feels like a quivering national security disaster that we apparently have been living through since the supervisor has been there, and we didn't know it.
Yeah, I mean, and I certainly would like to see eventually some more reporting, some more detail on what these cases were. It could certainly be, within this, 30 cases, whatever the number was, that part of it was they got backlogged, they got caught up because so many of the people that President Trump brought in, his friends, his business colleagues, have extensive business holdings, have extensive foreign ties because of the nature of their business careers, and security was struggling with it. That's not normally what you have with people holding security clearances. Most people don't have that. that. And so it's very possible that for at least some of it, this was just an issue of a backlog of them struggling to figure out what to do one way or the other, and Klein was trying to clear it out. What I am particularly worried about, what I want to hopefully, as the reporting continues on, and I look forward to hearing more of it, is whether or not improper political considerations were brought in here, particularly for the president's children, Ivanka and Jared Kushner, particularly for people like Michael Flynn, who we know had issues with reporting stuff on his SF-86. We know Sebastian Gorka apparently, at least allegedly, had at least an interim security clearance despite having applied at one point for a foreign government clearance. My clients would never even be considered for interim access in that situation. So there's certainly a lot more detail we need to find out about whether or not this was just Klein coming in trying to fix a logjam, or if there were truly some serious improprieties here beyond the Jared Kushner situation.
I'm worried that the darker implication of what you're suggesting there is already spelled out in Ken's reporting. He's saying that this is at least 30 cases in which Klein overruled career security experts and approved a top-secret clearance for incoming officials despite unfavorable information. So it's not just he said, short-circuit this, I'm sure it's fine, approve these guys. There's unfavorable information that indicates grant no clearance, and they're granting it anyway. Those kind of red flags. I mean, we don't know exactly what the red flags are, as you point out, in case to case. But boy, this is a big story. Mr. Moss, Bradley Moss, national security attorney. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, anytime, Rachel.
All right. Lots more to get to. Genuinely busy news night tonight. Stay with us.